Welcome to Crime Most French, a weekly podcast taking you through intriguing cases carried out on French soil. Researched and narrated by Cedric and rudely interrupted by me, Melanie. We're the true crime podcast All the Lions. Crack open le vin and let the mayhem commence.
This week's episode takes us to the end of the First World War to 1919 in Tulle, which is the capital of Corrèze. For those who don't know where it is, that's the arse end of nowhere.
I would have to say it is a very beautiful arse. It's a lovely, lovely department. We have family there. It's so undulating and just so picturesque. I'd love to live there. Very cold in the winter, though.
Yes, because it's on the edge of the Massif Central, so it gets cold. And in fact, every time we go, it snows.
Yes.
So in 1917, some anonymous letters are received by people all over the city, and they're signed at some point by the Tiger's Eye.
Okay.
These letters contain insults, they accuse people of things, they lie about what people have done. Some of the recipients are well known, some are just random people. The only common point between all these people seems to be that they live in the same city. That's about it.
It's very bizarre for a whole city to be a town. City. I mean, what we're talking population-wise?
At the time, 13,000.
Okay. So, I mean, that's still quite a lot of people to indiscriminately attack.
Yes. It's not much bigger today. It's 16,000 today, so it's still a very small town.
Yeah. But it's quite a job writing to a random section of that population. Somebody has too much time on their hands, clearly.
Yes. The affair is going to lead to a few deaths and the involvement of the very young at the time scientific police. It is also the source, the origin story of a French expression, which is that anonymous letters are sent by the crow. The story will explain why this is.
Okay, that's cool.
So the letters appear for the first time in 1917 at the prefecture in Tulle. That's the administrative center of the city.
Yeah, and the prefecture kind of like wields quite a lot of power at the department level.
It is the representative of the state.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that comes from the state goes via the prefecture.
Yeah.
So they decide everything. Sometimes build permits, road works. They decide absolutely everything around the department.
So essentially just the head of the council, I guess. The local council would be the British equivalent.
Department level.
Yeah.
Not city or town level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like a provost, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But with real power.
Yes, rather than just a big chain.
Yeah. Yes. So between 1917 and 1922, there's a total of about 110 letters that are found in the streets, sometimes on windowsills, sometimes on the floor in entrance halls of buildings, sometimes on church benches, sometimes on desks in offices.
Yeah.
Sometimes even in the confessional.
Wow.
So they appear all over the place.
This is somebody's full-time hobby.
Yeah, it is.
They really need to think about either getting into the garden or sitting down with some cross-stitch. That's a lot of work.
Yes. The actual first letter appears in the prefecture, and it is received by Louise Laval. Mm-hmm. And the letter calls her the big unwashed. It warns her of her daughter and tells her to watch out for her daughter because her manager is not trustworthy. Her manager was Jean-Baptiste Moury, and he was the manager of Angèle Laval, the daughter of Louise.
Okay.
Louise decides to burn the letter. She doesn't want any of that around her
yeah,
house.
well, so basically, you're a big manky cow, and be careful who your daughter's working for. He's completely untrustworthy.
Yeah, that's the essence of the letter.
Okay.
Yeah. In December 1917, very shortly after, another appears on Angèle's desk this time, so Louise's daughter, who the first one warned about.
She was the subject, really.
Yeah. The letter describes her manager as a seductor, but at the time he's single. He has a mistress, and she's fairly well known.
Okay.
She even has a kid with him a few years earlier.
Is she? I take it she's not married.
No.
So when...
Two single people.
Yes, so she's not. You mean she's not really the mistress, is she? She's just like they're just unmarried.
Well, that's why she's called a mistress.
Yeah, that's just disgusting.
So, yeah. So no, now there would be nothing wrong with that. Nobody would really care.
No.
But at the time, it was a big thing.
Mm.
And he pays everything for her. So he pays for her rent, for her food. It's like they're married, but not.
Mm-hmm.
He's never told about his mistress to his mom.
Okay.
Apparently, it was a big thing, according to the press at the time. But he's planning to leave that mistress for Marie-Antoinette Few, who he just hired at the prefecture as an employee.
Okay.
That's just a plan at that point. These revelations would be bad for him, for his reputation in his career.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't want that to be known.
No.
Shortly after, Muri, the manager, also receives a letter on his desk, still at the prefecture. It warns him to be wary of one of his employees, Angèle Laval, who was the subject of the first letter and received the second.
Yeah.
And it advises him not to marry Marie-Antoinette Few.
Okay. So it definitely seems to be someone who possibly is connected with the prefecture.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, definitely by location at least.
Definitely.
And somebody who has access to the building.
Yes, and who knows everybody.
Yeah. Muri isn't attracted to Angèle at all, and because the letter talks about her, he decides to talk to her about it. And she tells him that she also received a couple of letters talking about him and describing him as a liar, womanizer, player, whatever was considered bad at the time.
Yeah.
So they decide together to burn the letters in the accounting department's woods burner, which apparently was important because the press mentions it.
Wow. They're stoking the wood burner.
Yes. A few more letters arrive at the prefecture, but nothing really comes of it, and things go quiet during 1918.
Okay.
In 1919, Muri intensifies his relationship with Marie-Antoinette.
So he's gone public.
He's gone more public,
okay.
Yes. In the meantime, more letters appear around Tulle. The prefect even receives one.
Okay, go straight to the top.
Yeah. And the letter he receives describes how his wife is unfaithful and how it's all his fault. And it also mentions that even the street sweeper gets his way with his wife. Even the local priest receives a letter. It calls him a failed priest.
Wow.
So nobody's safe from those letters.
It's quite widespread and quite scathing.
Yeah.
Not just full of gossip, but judgy gossip.
Very judgy gossip, yes. In 1921, Muri and Marie-Antoinette decide to get married, so they decide to make it official. That triggers an escalation in the letters. Also, they go from anonymous letters to pseudonymous letters. They are now signed The Tiger's Eye.
So we've now got a nom de plume to the letter.
We do, yes. Also, the spread increases. It's no longer letters that are sent by post or received at the prefecture on a desk. They now appear all over Tulle. The delivery method also changes. They are now left lying around the streets, so on the pavement. People find those letters on the pavement, on windowsills in houses, in buildings. Some people even found letters after having gone to the market to do their shopping in their bags, in their pockets.
That's nuts.
It's totally nuts.
I mean, it's turned into kind of like systematic, just skullduggery into just propaganda at that point.
And the randomness makes it very difficult to find out what it is that caused it or who, because they appear all over the town and in totally random places.
Well, yeah, it's like spree killing, isn't it? And they're the most difficult to catch, spree murderers, spree letters.
So the targets are very specific, but the distribution method is really vague.
Yeah.
At some point, they also nearly turn into a game. So the letters are given to a person somehow, for example, in their bag.
Right.
And it requests the recipient of that letter to give it to another person, and that other person to give it to a third person.
So creating a chain letter.
A chain letter to be sure that whatever is in the letter spreads.
Spreads to its maximum effect.
So the final recipient can't just burn it and forget about it, because he knows that all these people before him have had the letter in their hands and have read it and will talk about it.
I'll tell you, I hate to say this, but in my gut, I'm feeling this is a woman. And this is a woman who has been scorned at some point.
Yeah, you would think so. the purpose of these letters is clearly to turn people against each other. So they're designed in their content also to be interesting to people who read it, because they contain things that are probably true.
Yeah.
They mention, for example, affairs, suicides in the family that have been kept quiet, sterility, abortions. All these are probably true,
Yeah.
but they are drowned in a sea of lies.
Wow.
But of course, the people who saw these letters on the way to the recipient will not know which is true and which is not true in the letters.
Yeah, just that grain of truth is enough to kind of like taint
It makes the whole thing true as far as people is concerned. So they are actually designed to hurt and to spread as much as possible. At some point, there's even a poster that appears on the door of the theater in Tulle.
Okay.
It lists 14 people's name, and next to them, the alleged name of their lovers. The local press at the time says that poster has seen more traffic than any other poster ever, except the announcement of the mobilization in 1914.
Wow. So
people queue to go and see who the names are on
who's
that
doing
poster.
who, and quite.
Strangely, Marie and Marie Antoinette are mostly avoided by those letters. It's even more than that. Sometimes they're praised. The letters say they've done a good thing getting married and making it official. And people start thinking, if they're praised and if they are mostly avoided by those letters, doesn't that mean that they sent them in the first place?
I don't know. To me, I wouldn't personally think that. But what I would think was the person who is writing it is incredibly pious and very, very religious.
Yeah, but at the time it would have been pretty much everybody.
I guess so. Yeah,
at the time there would have been like 90 or 95% of people going to church on Sunday.
I guess I don't really have that much in common with the silent generation, rural French person. So yeah.
Yeah. Eventually, the prefect decides that that's enough, and he requests an inquiry into what is going on.
Yeah.
An instructing judge, as we've explained before, we have three kinds of judges.
Three types of judges. Yeah.
We have the instructing judge that works with the police to investigate a case and solve the case.
Yeah.
Then we have the prosecuting judge, which is the equivalent of the prosecutor in the US. And then we have the judge that sits at the trial, which is going to be the one making the decision in the end. So in this case, it's an instructing judge first that is appointed. He's called François Richard. And he works with the police to try to solve the affair. But unfortunately, he has nothing to work with. There's nothing in the file whatsoever. There's no evidence. There's no witnesses. There's no information other than a few letters, because most of them have been burnt. Some of them, very few, have been printed in the press, but a very small number because the newspapers decided at the time that it was too personal and they shouldn't publish it. That would not happen today.
No, so, they would be,
You can imagine what the Sun would do in that.
Yeah, published and be damned, definitely.
So he has absolutely nothing to work with. So he requests a few analyses from various people who are specialized in some fields, but the results are contradictory.
Oh.
So that comes to nothing again. Yeah. Eventually, he resorts to interviewing everybody and his dog.
Well,
everybody he sees who thinks could possibly be involved at some level, he tries to interview. But that doesn't come to anything. No. Then he tries hypnosis. So the people who he interviews get hypnotized and interrogated under hypnosis. Still brings absolutely nothing.
Apart from the fact that kind of amusing parlor trick of getting them to pretend they're chickens, yeah.
Yeah. Eventually, a witness relates the story to the instructing judge, which piques his interest. The story is that the guy who is interrogating knows about the content of a letter that has been sent to someone else.
Right.
Because Angèle Laval, remember at the start of the story,
she was the subject of the first letter.
And the target of the second.
Yeah.
Told him about it. However, the recipient of the letter has never mentioned it to anyone. He's also interrogated, and he confirms the content of the letter. He confirms having received it, but he denies having told to anyone what the letter contained.
Well, that's a real dun-dun-dun moment.
It is. So at that point, the instructing judge decides that it must be Angèle that sent the letters. She's the only person who could possibly have known about them if nobody else talked about it. In December 1921, the story reaches national level. It's picked up by newspapers.
So we've been at it for almost 3 years at this point, yeah?
Yes, and it was only local at the time. Most people consider them a campaign of slander,
yes,
or defamation. So it doesn't really go very far. It goes in the Corrèze press probably, but no more than that.
But just tittle-tattle, really.
Yes.
And a minor inconvenience and red faces all round, but nothing to worry the whole nation about.
Yes. However, at the end of 1921, the first death happens. And that's why it get pushed to the national level.
Yeah.
Also, the national press at the time was starved of stories because the laundry affair, which we talked about in an earlier episode, I think it might have been episode 3 or 4, just finished. And that sold a lot of newspapers. But suddenly, nothing important happens. 1921 is not a very important year.
No.
So they see that story as a potential new laundry affair. Maybe something more is happening. Maybe people are dying. We don't know about it. So they send newspaper reporters to investigate what was going on in Tulle. The first non-just trivial slander bit of the story appears when a clerk at the prefecture called Auguste Gilbert receives a letter. And the letter explains that the Eye of the Tiger is in fact his wife. And the letter is signed Madame Gilbert. He doesn't want his wife to be involved in that. He doesn't want her name to be dragged in the street as the person who sent all these horrible letters. Yeah. So he confesses himself to the letters.
He dies in a sword that isn't really a true sword. Oh dear.
He doesn't die, but he goes crazy.
Oh.
He's interned into the local mental hospital.
Yeah.
And that's where he ends his life.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yes. But now the letters change. They are signed by actual people. That was the first one.
Okay.
So instead of being signed nothing, then the Eye of the Tiger, or Tiger's Eye, now they're signed by actual people in the city, just to try to mess a bit more with people. But the first death happens just soon after that when Mary, so town council secretary, receives one and kills himself with pills.
Wow.
That's the first death of the story. And that's why the national press becomes very interested.
Yeah, it's a line has kind of like been crossed.
Yeah, now people are dying, so now it's worth it.
Going insane or dying, it's...
Yeah. So the first national level article appears on the 30th of December 1921 in Le Matin. Le Matin was the largest newspaper at the time by a long way. No longer exists. I don't know what happened to it, but it was the largest newspaper at the time.
Is that matin as in morning?
Yes, because it was published in the morning. At that point, the justice system vows to resolve the affair because now it's in the press. There's pressure. The public opinion now knows about it. They want something done. So they decide, yes, we will solve that affair. The instructing judge's first step is to arrest Angèle Laval, who he suspected was the person sending the letters. But unfortunately, he has nothing against her.
No.
All he has is suspicion. Some story he was told that she knew more than she should have.
Yeah.
But that's not enough to arrest her and convict her of anything. Also, because now stories are in the national press, he becomes part of the story. He becomes one of the stars of the story.
Of course.
So he's solicited from left and right. He gives interviews to everybody. And he really enjoys it because now he's somebody very famous.
Oh, it's totally the first prosecutor in the case of the Petit Grégoire.
Yes, Gregory.
Yeah.
Yes. It doesn't help that the press is trying to inflate the story to something it's not. So, for example, one of the things that one of the first articles mentions is that there's 60 letters sent a day, when in reality there's been 60 letters so far in 3.5 years.
Yeah.
But they make it like it's a massive campaign that floods the city of letters when there's one once in a while.
Not like the press to overinflate a story, is it?
Exactly. They want to make it a story even if it's not. But of course, because then it becomes something massive and something never heard of, the judge who investigates it is famous. He really wants to get somewhere because now people watch him. So he even tries to involve mediums to find something about who it was.
Pull out the Ouija board.
Yes. And because he feels so important and confident, he also talks about his thoughts, his doubts, his feelings to reporters who, of course, report everything he says. And some of it is not very clever. So, unfortunately, that's a step too far.
Yes.
And the minister gets rid of him and decides that he's just too rational. We don't want him involved. That's it. He's gone.
Yeah.
So the inquiry restarts from scratch with someone else involved. Right. At the same time, the local priests, who has received some letters as well, visits Angèle and her mom at their house.
Okay.
And during that visit, he spots a half-finished letter on the table that looks strangely like the letters he received. He immediately reports it to the police, of course, and the local chief of police visits the house. Apparently, the local press said that he locked himself in the bedroom with Angèle and interrogated her forever.
Yeah.
But she never confesses to anything.
It doesn't crack.
It doesn't crack. So again, they have nothing against her.
Well, surely half written letters, almost like a smoking gun.
Almost. She could probably explain it by saying somebody left it there. We've received lots of people.
Written?
Yeah. Because the inquiry doesn't have a lot of budget. There's a subscription that's organized in Tulle to fund the request of Edmond Locard, who we talked about, I think it might have been in the first episode. He created the first scientific police in Lyon in 1910. Mm-hmm. He's the one that was visited by Conan Doyle at some point, and that solved the affair that he was working on. Mm-hmm. He invented something he calls graphimetry, which we would now call graphology or something like that. And he gets involved in January 1922, paid by the public.
So basically, it's a GoFundMe to do handwriting analysis.
It's exactly that. Mm-hmm. Yes. But at the time, it was fancy and new.
Yes, of course.
Now it would be like, what?
Yeah.
So at his arrival, he collects all the letters that have been found, and he reads them over and over and over and over. And after a while, he starts discovering patterns in the form and in the content of the letters. For example, certain words use the wrong gender consistently.
Okay.
Also, he starts to notice the way things are written. Some letters are always the same way. They have something specific in them. So he's starting to notice things, and he suspects 8 possible suspects.
Okay.
8 women.
So basically, he's looking for linguistic tics.
Yeah, that too, yes.
So as you say, making the same spelling mistakes, using the same words,
the same phrases. Yes.
Because we all do it.
Yes. Mm. Among these 8 women, there's Marie Antoinette. Mm-hmm. There's Angèle Laval, her mom, and a few other women.
I know who my money's on.
So what he does is he calls them one by one, and he makes them write what he tells them. And he makes them write for hours.
Oh, it sounds like an English lesson.
It totally is. And he makes them write left and right hand, because looking at the letters, he suspects that the person who wrote the letters uses the hand they don't normally write with.
So it's manufactured.
These guys, they're writing.
Rather than naturally writing.
Yeah, so he makes them write for several hours.
Oh, that'd be tiring.
The first one to go is Angèle Laval. And he notes in his notebook for his report that she spent 12 minutes writing the first line. Clearly, she's not too sure how she should do it.
Yeah.
And he says she goes over and over the same lines, writing that one line.
It's just to try and disguise it, I guess.
Yes. Or she's not too sure maybe how to disguise it. But as she writes after several hours and gets tired, she disguises her writing less and less, and he starts to see what the letters look like in her writing. So at that point, he's convinced it's her.
Yeah. I don't think anybody who's listening to this story isn't convinced it's her. It's totally her.
Yeah, but you need to prove it. You need to do a bit more to convict her. Okay. That's the thing.
Book her, Dano, that's what I say.
So as he's certain that it's her, you would expect that she would be arrested, but no, she's let go.
Oh. That
because
seems
they
a foolish
decide
move.
at the time it's not sufficient.
Okay.
She knows she's been found out at that point
Okay.
because she must have realized she wasn't hiding her writing very well.
No.
So to try to avoid prosecution and the public opinion, she convinces her mother to jump into the nearby lake to commit suicide.
Nice.
They do it. They both jump.
Oh, okay.
But Angèle survives because she's rescued by passerbys. Her mom, no. She
Oh,
dies.
good Lord.
She is the second victim of the Eye of the Tiger. Then she's arrested because that's really going too far this
Well,
time.
yes. Suicide pacts, come on.
So she's placed in a local mental hospital awaiting trial. And there she's checked by psychologists and they say, yep, she's fit for trial.
Mm-hmm.
So the trial starts. It starts on the 4th of December 1922.
Okay.
She comes all dressed in black in mourning clothes because she lost her mom
Well, yeah.
of her own doing.
Yes.
It makes a lot of noise at that point because Tulle, being the capital of the department, is also the city that has the tribunal.
Oh, of
So
course, yes.
the case is judged in the middle of the people who are the victims of the case.
Are you really going to get a fair hearing at that point? But
Probably not.
no.
But
do you really care at
that
point?
point is so obvious as well. So
Yeah.
really, do we need to spend time on this? So she denies everything when she's interrogated. But 23 witnesses are called. And the victim's lawyer, who represents the victims of her letters,
Okay.
presents his case, I think, for 5 hours. The prosecutor, following that, does it for 3 hours.
Okay.
And her lawyer defends her for 2 hours. So that was a very long day.
Yeah.
On the 20th of December 1922, she's found guilty. The judge writes a 60-page report.
Enough with her head.
Yep. She's sentenced to 1 month in prison.
No, off with her head. 1 month.
She's sentenced to 1 month in prison, 100 francs of fine, and 200 francs of damages for the victims.
That's disgusting.
She appeals because she thinks it's unfair.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I think she has a cheek. I would like to call it unfair.
The court in Limoges confirms the judgment. The reason why she's not sentenced to more than that is because the spread in time is long enough that many of the letters have reached statute of limitation. So they can only use 15 of the letters, 15 of the 110 to sentence her. And unfortunately, that's not much to sentence someone to more than a month in prison.
I mean, it's just, isn't it so ludicrous that some crimes are forgivable after a period of time, whereas others just aren't? It seems just so unfair.
It's only murder, I think, in most countries that doesn't have
yeah.
statute of limitation, but everything else has, yes. So she serves her sentence, and then she goes back to her house in Tulle, where she lives as a hermit for the rest of her life.
Well, I'm thinking she's probably not getting many invitations out to dinner.
No, she probably doesn't have many friends at that point.
No, if I was her, I'd be thinking about moving to another part of the country, but she obviously didn't.
Well, she couldn't afford it, most likely.
After paying all the reparations and fines,
That wasn't much anyway, but she had inherited the house, so...
Oh, of course, yes, because she essentially killed her mother.
Exactly, so...
Shocking.
And it's not the pay of a secretary in the prefecture that's going to allow you to move around the country that much.
No.
Especially at the time.
No.
So she's financially supported by her brother as well anyway. And she dies on the 16th of November 1967. She was 81.
I bet nobody went to her funeral.
I don't know. So why did I talk about the crow at the start?
Yes.
It's a very famous expression. Everybody, if you mention the crow or the raven, depending on how you want to translate it, it's the same thing in French. People know exactly what it is. That means anonymous letter. And in fact, the letters in the case of the little Gregory were signed the crow.
Okay.
It comes originally from an article published in Le Matin on the 5th of December 1922.
So just before the trial?
At the trial. In fact, it was at the start of the trial.
Okay, yeah.
Or the next day. The journalist describes Angèle as she's there, small, a bit round, short, looking under her mourning clothes like, and she says it herself, a poor bird with folded wings.
Okay.
The journalist doesn't mention crow, but that's the description that everybody associates with a crow. Everybody saw a crow when they read that.
Yeah.
But it's not used yet. That affair is related in a magazine called Detective, which was a true crime magazine at the time.
So a trashy, pulpy magazine.
Yeah, it was, yes. And some of the stories are also embellished in that. Half of them is novel-like.
Yes.
Half of the stories are kind of true, but it's hard to make the distinction between the two. That's what detective is like.
It's the old get the air bunny quotes out based on a true story.
Yeah, in previous episodes, I've read the articles that were published in the Detective when I was preparing the podcast. And I had to be very careful and cross-check with other things to know what part was true, what part was invented. So, for example, the last episode that happened in a village near us.
Yes.
There was an article in the Detective, and I read it, and it was written in real time. So it was published the week it happened.
Okay.
And I had to double-check all the details in it to be sure that most of them, at least, I could check were right. Not everything, because that article had more details than other sources, but at least I could check that most of what I could find seemed okay.
Yeah.
But that's what detective is. And that article was read by a writer called Louis Chavance, and it gave him the idea of a scenario based on Angèle's stories. And he titles the story The Snake Eye, because that's better than the Tiger's Eye. For years and years, that scenario was not picked up by cinema companies until it is presented to Henri-Georges Clouzot, who's a very famous film director at the time. So we're talking before and during Second World War. And he gets very interested in that story.
Okay.
So he meets with the writer and they talk about it. And they decide to name the film The Crew, which is a very famous film.
Okay.
And they use that as both the title of the film and the sender of the letters. And that's why people now know letters that are anonymous are sent by the crew.
It's
that comes from that film inspired by the article inspired by the real story.
Yeah.
And that's how the expression is born.
Oh, there you go.
And that's the end of the story.
And an expression. And I think the moral of the tale this week is definitely not all angels have wings.